The Golden Stallion, the Man Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R, Radio Star, here for your little Sovereign Tech Patreon only Q&A. And oh baby, do we got a lot of things really to get into, and some stuff to follow up from recent Patreon episodes that I think would be a good fit to get in here. But I'll tell you, it's funny. So the past couple days, Ellen and I have been watching Flash Gordon, the original set with Buster Crabbe from 1934, which came together. It's like 13 episodes, but it all comes together as Spaceship to the Unknown. And I got to tell you, I've seen this maybe 3 times before, and I don't know how it never really clicked for me, but it's amazing how much the 1980 Flash Gordon film, which I just love, and I've talked about many times. Of course, most people, really know it for its soundtrack, for its score, which was done by Queen. And it's amazing how much they got in there, and how much it's so much like what was actually done in 1934. I mean, they really, really paid, you could say, fan service or homage to the original 1934 serial that was out there. And another thing I was noticing watching it, I was just like, holy shit, and Star Trek, the original series, had this kind of magic too, right? I mean, we were both enjoying the hell out of it, but like what was amazing was that because what these were designed for, these Flash Gordon serials back in the day, it was to incentivize you to go to the movie theater. Again, we're talking 1934, the movie theater every week. Right? It was to get you, because they would play these like 20-minute, and each episode's about 20 minutes. Okay. So you end up with a whole movie at the end of the day. I mean, 13 episodes, actually a lot more than a whole movie. But it would be, okay, every week you're going to get a new serial of Flash Gordon, and whatever movie was coming out that week, they'd want you to catch. Now, I mean, Pixar kind of does this today, but not in such a serialized form. I'm shocked, frankly, that movie theaters or movie houses, production houses and whatever, studios, that they're not trying this again. Like if there's real problems, with ticket sales and things like this, holy shit, put out this serialized kind of action like Flash Gordon, and it works great. But it's amazing, and this is the point I was going to get to, that the original series of Star Trek is like as well. How much it hooks you. Like, you really, really, when the first one ends, they know just how to end it, and you really want to see what happens next. I mean, they get you quick. I remember Star Trek, the original series. Actually, I remember a really old interview back when Tom Snyder, the late, great Tom Snyder, when he used to host what was called The Tomorrow Show, not The Tom Snyder Show, but actually The Tomorrow Show, and I guess this would have been back in the 70s. And he was, he had the Star Trek cast on. It's a great interview. It has the original series cast on. And he's talking about how, like, they're watching a clip just so, the audience that's watching the Tomorrow Show can see, okay, what's Star Trek all about. And they're watching it for like maybe a minute, maybe tops. And Tom Snyder, like, as soon as the clip stops, the camera goes to Tom Snyder, and he just stops, and he's looking, and he's like dumbfounded, because he's like, oh, wait, we're back? Because he got inside of a minute. He was so hooked on what was on display. And Star Trek was really great at that, especially the original series was really, really solid at being able to like hook you in very quickly. Just, you got to find out what's going to happen next, I mean, there's so many great narrative tools that Star Trek had. It really shines, but obviously they weren't new. They were very much stuff that was done in Flash Gordon. Something else I noticed is that a lot of the effects, honestly, that were used in Flash Gordon, especially a lot of the makeup effects or character effects, a guy in a suit that kind of looks like a gorilla or something like this, not much of that changed in the 30 years between when Flash Gordon came out and, back in, or later on in 66, when Star Trek becomes a thing, not much really changed. It's really, really fascinating. And you see a lot, including stuff that even George Lucas would do in episode 1. You see so quickly. And I've mentioned this before on Sovereign Tech when I've talked about Flash Gordon, because I'm a huge fan. You really do see how much Star Wars that George Lucas openly copied. And he doesn't mind copying it, and I don't mind that he copied it. I do the same thing all the time. There's what's the old saying? Real artists steal, right? And I mean, you just straight steal. You don't even bother borrowing. You just steal. And well, anyway, I was, we were both enjoying it, and it was awesome. So yeah, Flash Gordon, check that shit out if you never did, especially the first couple ones, Spaceship of the Unknown, and then there's the one to Mars that's really both of those are really enjoyable. The third one doesn't have Buster Crabbe in it, if I remember correctly, but anyway, we're here to talk. We're here to get into some questions, baby. So let's get into those questions. And well, I'm all right. I'm kind of choosing eeny, meeny, miny, mo here, which ones to open up with, but I'm going to open up with this one. So recently, I did a book review of The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, which I thought was a brilliant book, even if I didn't agree with it 100%. And do check out the book review. I think I made a good summation of what was in the book, and gave some of my own thoughts and everything else on it. So a patron asked about that. Brian, from where do you get your audiobooks? You tear through a lot of audiobooks, and Audible doesn't seem like it would be, quote unquote, enough for you. Now, this is interesting because I've actually gotten a lot of questions recently of people asking, hey, where do you get your media? Where do you get your content? Where do you get your stuff? So as far as audiobooks, now I am going to, okay. So I'll tell you how this works. There's two ways. Normally I do pay for an Audible subscription. Okay. So I do get Audible, because Audible offers a lot more than just audiobooks, right? And actually they offer to Audible subscribers, you often get a lot of free books. In fact, one of the great free books you can get on there, I just found, and it's an Audible original, and it's done by full theatrical cast, or theater cast, I should say. They have Dangerous Liaisons, the original libertine work from France, and in English, of course, and so well done, so fucking well done. So, I mean, it's nice that Audible offers free books often enough. But yeah, obviously, if I was only getting 1 or 2 books a month, like that doesn't make up for the amount of books that I actually read. Well, here's one thing. Okay, let's just say that I know somebody who maybe gets Audible credits, and maybe they hook me up with quite a few of those. So that's one way that I do that. All right. The other is that I will often, if it's important enough, and Audible's the only way I can get it, I will buy the book. Okay, I have no problem paying a full the member price to get my hands on a lot of these books, and some of these books that are just pure dynamite. What they cost $5. I mean, fuck, I'll pay $5. I don't care. Like a lot of, or you can get some great works like from Aleister Crowley on there and everything, and I mean, those are very inexpensive. There's a bunch. And I mean, and usually they're very cheap. Honestly, I'll pay for a book on Audible if it costs less than my Audible subscription. Like I'm happy to buy it. But also, admittedly, I use worldwidetorrents.eu and Pirate Bay, or should I say, I know somebody that uses those, and they may check daily in the book section to see what audiobooks have been released. So and then maybe I acquire them that way. So I'll describe it thus. So a lot of them do get torrented. A lot of these books are acquired through torrenting. And I mean, like, audiobooks are wildly popular on torrenting. They don't always come out on release day, which is why I'm still happy to use Audible. And there's still a lot of them that never come out, or never available on torrents, that are only available on Audible. So, again, I'm really happy to do that. I use the app that I use for listening to independent audiobooks outside of Audible. Is Smart Audiobook Player, and it is an app that you can pay for to get premium features, and I think it's well worth paying for. It's a phenomenal app, far better app than even the Audible app, by leaps and bounds. And I'll just transfer the book onto my smartphone or tablet, whatever, and I'll listen to it through Smart Audiobook Player. If I am listening to it for some reason on my computer, I just use VLC. And VLC, I always customize to have the time slider on it, where you can, or the speed slider, where you can, turn it up to 1.5x, 2.x, or, 2.0x, whatever, or 2x, whatever, just like you would with a podcast app. So I will use VLC as my audiobook player, though there is an Audible app for Windows 10 that does a great job. And certainly it's handy that Audible syncs between devices, right? Like, it'll always ask you, hey, do you want to check this out? Blah, blah, blah. Now, the one problem, or not, I don't want to say it's the one problem, but one of the problems with not having them on Audible is that they will Well, bottom line, I can't play them off of my Kindle Oasis, which I like doing. I like connecting, Bluetooth headphones to my Kindle Oasis. That way I'm not carrying around my fucking smartphone, because fuck smartphones. And really. So it kind of sucks that I can't, load my own independent books onto the Kindle Oasis. But that's generally how I acquire all that, and how I listen to them so quickly is because every piece of software that I use to listen to them allows you to listen to them at some, and it depends on the book. Like, so if it's a Star Wars or a Star Trek book, I can listen to it at like 2.5x, because I'm already so familiar with the world that, is being explored. I can take in everything and I can imagine it very quickly. Okay. As to where, if it's, even a piece of fiction or obviously nonfiction that, is really like deep stuff, particularly say like something like The Order of Time, even though it's a shorter book, usually I have to listen to it at 2x max, or maybe 2.1, just to be able to take it all in. But if it's something that I'm really familiar with, then I can, it's no problem. I can actually listen to it, at a very, very fast speed and get everything that's going on. And look, honestly, especially, Star Trek books, not so much, but certainly with the Star Wars books, the really great shit that happens, I've attuned my ear to listen for the things that matter. What is in a Star Wars book, what's something that happens within a novel that has broad ramifications to everything else that's going on in the universe? Or is this character really cool and I want to pay attention every time they come on? And I might slow it down for that or re-listen to those parts and everything. But I with a lot of the novels, let's all be honest with each other here. A lot of what Disney's putting out there is just bullshit filler. A lot of it, the Canto Bight book, personally, I thought the Most Wanted book was pretty rough. Last Shot was actually all right. But a lot of the Star Wars books as late, there's been great ones, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, the Thrawn books I think are great. Well, the second one hasn't come out yet, but you get my point. But the Phasma book and some of this other stuff. And of course, I don't think this is filler. I think the novelization for The Last Jedi is great. Far better than the movie. But, you know what you're going for, right? When you're a Star Wars sweaty, when you're a real diehard for that, you know what you're getting. So anyway, and maybe we'll talk about some of that stuff on the upcoming Star Wars update that will be out later this month for June 2018, where Robin and I, we dig deep. So, we'll see how that shakes up. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I do as far as audiobooks. That's how I consume so many, is that, I certainly purchase a lot, quote unquote, legitimately. And then in other ways, I acquire them in other ways. And certainly torrent sites, get used by someone out there. So, and I listed off the two that maybe that someone, I dare not say it's me, but that someone, happens to use. So, okay. Let's go on to the next one. And this is actually a response to the Relationship Rhombus show that Stephanie and I released. Was that earlier this week? Well, a few days ago anyway. So, and here it is. I'm shocked that you've seen a Serbian film. Okay, now that's the name of a movie, a Serbian film. I'm shocked that you've seen this. Doesn't seem like the kind of movie you'd be interested in. I'm curious, why do you watch it? Why did you watch it? Okay, so this is a movie that came out in 2010 and has been banned in multiple countries from, being able to be shown or whatever. Obviously, torrent sites don't stop or, keep any, there's no media that can really be banned as long as there are torrent sites, right? So, you can still see this, and it's had various cuts. There's the completely uncut version. Then I think there's a toned down version that you can see in other countries that got it in there. I watched the, totally uncensored, blah, blah, blah version of the film. This is, yes, like I said on Relationship Rhombus show, I do not recommend watching this movie. There are visuals in it. There are things in it that will stick with you for the rest of your life that are positively, and I am a person who personally in my lifetime, I have seen some pretty horrible shit in real life. And there are things in this movie that some of it disturbs me at that level, at that same level. It's that bad. The reason that I watched it is part of I'm still very much a cinephile, but I've really gotten to the point personally myself where I think most of the great movies have been made. okay, if not all, and granted, The Greatest Showman and Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, those two movies that came out in 2017 would be exceptions to the rule, that those are two movies that I can't imagine my life without. But at the same time, they're really exceptional, and I couldn't have anticipated that those kinds of things would come out. And also fascinating that those are both kind of biographical, right? Kind of, after a fashion. Certainly both based on true stories. However true they are, that's where people can debate what they want. But in general, I think most of the great movies have been made. But anyway, I've only more recently come to that conclusion. There was a time, certainly around 2010, where it was my goal in life, me and a great buddy of mine who I worked with at the last major tech company I was with, and it was around the time that this came out. It was just before I moved to New Hampshire. We were trying to make the biggest DVD collections that we possibly could. Streaming hadn't taken over yet. Okay. It had just sort of started at this time in 2010. It's hard to believe just how new, Hulu and Netflix streaming and Amazon Prime Video and all these other things really are. I mean, that they've only been around for, a scant few years. So anyway, you hear, but when you're a cinephile and you hear, oh, there's this movie that's been banned and all this stuff, I mean, you kind of want to see it, right? Just that reason alone says, okay, what's that? And, I have a strong stomach, as did my buddy, as to my good friend at the time. And so he and I was like, all right, well, let's check it out. And we watched it, and I was kind of half watching it at work. And I'm really glad that I sort of was only half watching it, because fucking A, like I said, there's necrophilia, there's child sexual abuse, there's straight up rape. I mean, this is a really, really, really disgusting film. But it was totally a situation of curiosity killed the cat for me. It was just, I wanted to know what this was about. Now my buddy at the time, he was far more into the horror genre and into, movies that were disturbing in a way. And, we would share our best with each other. We'd be like, okay, well, here's, this is what I thought was an amazing movie this week. And he'd watch that. And then he'd share one with me and I'd watch that. And it was, kind of our way of being cultured, because he and I were really guys, well, I'm just going to say it because, like I said, I get accused of being arrogant. So why stop? We were two guys that really, we're guys that could do anything, and we enjoyed the learning process, always learning every day, taking in new information, all of these things, and being, after a fashion, cultured, and I don't mean in a conventional sense, but in a non-conventional sense. And, we liked our underground scenes. And I mean, I could tell a ton of stories about that had physical connotations, shall we say. We really enjoyed underground scenes and all this stuff. So this was a part of that. And that's really why I watched it. But I've never watched it again. I'd never watch it again. And I'd never tell anybody. I would say, save your curiosity for something else. Okay. Because it is just I can, just off the top of my head, I can think of 3 scenes that will just completely fuck with you in a terrible way. And just don't do it. So I know that me talking about it is almost like promoting it, almost goading you to watch it, but I'm fucking telling you, I'm not goading you. Don't do it. So there you go. There's a reason I think that there was so much. This is one of those cases where all the uproar around the film was well justified, in my opinion. So anyway, okay. So that's a Serbian film, and to answer that question, let's move on to something else here. Okay. And while we're talking about entertainment here, we'll get into that, and then we've got a little tech to get into in a bit here. But let's see. One thing, and this was actually in response to a previous Q&A episode on Patreon, which was about the new Thundercats cartoon. Which, what in the goddamn fuck, right? So here it is. Here it is. One thing I wonder if you'll touch on. What is this need to infantilize characters now? I see this with the Funko Pop figures, as well as these animation styles that seem to have the characters regress in apparent age. 2011, Lion-O had to be a teenager. Now he has to be some childlike looking thing. Same with the Teen Titans to some extent. Children used to be able to watch adult characters and not have the main characters be juveniles. It looks like we can't do that anymore. Now, this is a conversation I was having recently, too, about this, and that reminded me of this person asking this on that Thundercats episode. So I thought it'd be great to cover it here. Yeah. Now, this is the thing. So a couple things. Okay. One is that, yeah, I mean, in fact, I was saying this during the conversation. I was like, I don't get it. Like when I was a kid, all of my heroes were adults. Even if the cartoon, say, was made, or the comic book or whatever was made for kids, was effectively marketed towards children, the heroes were all still adults. Now Thundercats is a funny thing. Okay. Because in the original Thundercats series, which I'm a huge fan of, in the original Thundercats series, Lion-O was a teenager. It was kind of a Shazam situation, right? A Captain Marvel situation where Lion-O was a teenager, but his body aged as they were traveling, to Third Earth from Thundera. Okay. So really Lion-O's always sort of been a teenager, but this new Thundercats cartoon, not the one in 2011, which I thought was awesome. I mean, I get why they made them kind of teenager, but even then the 2011 Thundercats cartoon, which was, I mean, just dynamite. One of the best things made, in recent years and also Cartoon Network did a great He-Man reboot. That was awesome. That went like 2 seasons. I mean, that was really fucking awesome. But those two cartoons, like up until, say, Voltron Legendary Defender, which season 6 just came out, by the way, and I'll be doing a review of. Up until then, like these were very much, I mean, they were so great. I mean, there really hadn't been animation, American animation anyway, at that scale. It had been a while, and it's been a while now. And this new Thundercats, like I already said, is just horrendous. Like what they're doing, and this is real infantilizing. I mean, it really, really is. And it's taking something that's really a very epic and exciting story and just turning it into comedy. I mean, I'm partly disturbed by the infantilizing of everything that's going on. And the conspiracy theorist in me, and I don't use that term pejoratively, the conspiracy theorist in me makes me think that maybe they're wanting to keep kids, and maybe even not just kids, but keep them infantilized and everything. But I'm open to that. Okay. Because all right, let's talk about that for 1 second before I get into the other part that bothers me. Is that, when I was a kid, like, who did I want to be? I wanted to be Ric Flair. I wanted to be Captain Kirk. I can't think of a teenage fucking character that I wanted to be. I wanted to be an adult. Like, I was dying to be an adult. Like, oh yeah, give me autonomy, give me the ability to do this, give me that strength, give me blah, 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 give me that, experience and intelligence. Let me command the Enterprise, right? I wanted that so badly. And I think it's a problem when you're creating characters that are just like, I mean, I love The Simpsons, but even The Simpsons were like, there's this almost like eternal youth, and not eternal youth in the like, childlike wonder and, creativity and always learning kind of, beauty of eternal youth. I mean, because there's an eternal youth that is actually a very wonderful thing. But the eternal youth in that you never really grow beyond that. You never really become an independent adult, right? And yeah, like, why venerate that? Children are amazing and wonderful, creatures. They're little human beings that get so much right and are so brilliant. Okay. But at the same time, like, being stuck in that mode and then venerating that mode to where you don't appreciate and enjoy and look forward to the wonders of being an adult. And I don't get it. I don't understand that. And I could get into kind of what I think is the weirdness around adults making content for children, because I think that gets into some weird places too. I could certainly talk about that. I've hinted at it in the past. But the part that bothers me a little bit more is that pretty much, and I've talked about this also with Star Wars where it's happened and with other things, is that a lot of these franchises are being turned into comedies. And that bothers me maybe a little bit more. And the reason being is that it's like everything's just supposed to be a joke now. And I get it. Maybe what's going on is it's just everybody's so goddamn fucking depressed, that they can't, they just need to laugh all the time. And it's the only way, to appease the masses, to appease the the Muprons, right? Or the Muggles, like it's their bread and circuses, and everything just has to be a joke, because if there's anything serious, it's going to remind them to think about the seriousness of what's going on around them. And then they just fall deeper into depression. I don't know. It's like, it's really annoying. Look, I love comedy. But can I get some serious content? Can I get some stuff with some meaning, some depth? Or how about, can I get something, because then, also the comedy is all just like tragedy and trauma, right? Can I get some happy-go-lucky shit? Could I get some characters? Could I get some entertainment where people are happy, where people are like, I love life? You don't get that anywhere. Now, I understand that people would say, well, without conflict, you don't actually have a story. I kind of understand that, but at least give me people with the fucking attitude that, no, I can do anything. I can take care of this, have that independence and everything. Actually, some people sent me some great comments from the most recent episode of Sovereign Tech, episode 281, where I talked about how, I think that kind of the attitude, the you can do anything, take no prisoners attitude, which I think is great. It's a very egoist attitude that existed in the 80s. How, it wasn't all that in the 80s. And how I said, or how Stephanie came up with the idea that when the Soviet Union fell, the entertainment companies didn't feel like they needed to, create this anti-communist message anymore. I want to touch on that in a upcoming Sovereign Tech episode. Okay, because I want that the comments on that to be available to everybody. So I don't think I'm necessarily going to use that for a Q&A. Maybe I will, but I did get the comments on it in the emails, and I really appreciate those, and I think it's worth exploring more, because I don't think I touched on everything that I wanted to in that. But why does everything have to be a goddamn joke? I'm just, it's just playing. I feel like it plays, even though you think it's comedy and it's making people laugh. And again, I love comedy. Okay. But I feel like its prevalence and taking things that aren't comedic and then turning them into comedy really just falls into the misery Olympics, which we've got to get the fuck away from. Give me the people in my life that are looking at life like life is fucking amazing, because it is. And yeah, I know there's bad shit going on. Obviously, you see who's in the White House? No shit. But at the same time, you can carve your own fantastical niche even on this little, blue jewel we live on. And I want those kind of people around me, and I want that kind of entertainment around me that says, no, humans are fucking great and we can do these amazing things. That's what I want. And I feel like so much of that it's not there. It's really not there. And I've recently learned about other examples too, like just how terrible a lot of kids' television has become, frankly, and how it treats kids like idiots, and that's really pathetic, because kids are not. I mean, it's bad enough that most adults treat kids like idiots. The last thing we need, and again, maybe this speaks to the problem of adults making content for them. The last thing we need is, fucking media that they become obsessed with, that also treats them like morons, that treats them like idiots, because again, they're absolutely not. So anyway, yeah, I get your point. The infantilizing is the thing, with the Funko Pop figures. I don't complain about that so much. I get your point on that, but I do think that's more of a Japanese styling. I don't necessarily think that fits under in infantilizing, and also the inexpensive and the lack of intricacies that these figures require is what allows Funko to pay for all the licenses that they pay for to be able to make. I mean, like, I look at Funko Pops and I love them. So I do have a bias. Or you could argue that I have a bias, but like, I have a Funko Pop of Swamp Thing. Outside of the 80s or early 90s, I never thought I'd ever have like a Swamp Thing figure again of any kind. I have a Tron figure. What, a fucking Tron figure without the movie being out? I mean, this is the amazing thing about Funko Pop, is that they're releasing merchandise that is not beholden to the whims of Hollywood. Like, it's really not, because, Hollywood only releases action figure, or, movie studios and television, companies and everything. They only release shit when the show is hot, or when the movie is hot, when the movie's out and all that. And then, after that, the merchandise could fucking die, right? To their mind. And so that's sad, because you can't collect figures for these like really eternal characters and these eternal these stories that are really evergreen and, become cultural phenomenons in a way. So I don't complain so much about that. I understand why they do it that way. A, it's a Japanese styling. B, it's also like the lack of detail and intricacy is what really allows them to make so many different, from so many different franchises, make so many different, characters. Like, I mean, I have one from Independence Day, or actually the first and second movie. I've got one of Lemmy Kilmister. I've got the Doom guy. I have stuff from the original Battlestar Galactica. I never thought I'd be able to buy shit from the original Battlestar Galactica again, especially after that horrendous piece of shit show, that came out in 2005 that tried to reimagine it. So, yeah, I mean, and I think they just came out with they're coming out with Gargoyles Funko Pops and they came out with Motley Crue Funko Pops and all this stuff. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, outside of like McFarlane toys, and usually with those you have to pay some kind of premium, and they're usually so huge they take up your entire shelf. I like what Funko's doing, and I don't necessarily see that as infantilizing, but I could understand where you're coming from, certainly. But yeah, the things that are being done with the franchises, with our classic franchises, and it's not like it's destroying our childhoods or anything. Actually, it's destroying childhoods today, potentially. And that's a far more scarier prospect because it's not showing off these characters. I mean, even you think with Thundercats, again, like I said, yeah, sure, technically he's always been a teenager. But that was part of what made the show so great, was this teenager having to deal. I mean, in Thundercats, these artists at the time that did these shows, and you go down the list of them, okay, they had to try and sneak in some bigger ideas here and there. And Thundercats actually tried to be a cartoon with a moral story back in the day, kind of like G.I. Joe would try and be, even though inherently we all know the problems with that, right? But regardless, with Thundercats, they tried to bake in these ideas, and the 2011 Thundercats also tried to do the same thing, which I give them credit for. Sometimes they're a little too heavy-handed, but regardless, Lion-O was dealing with, shit, I have this body of a man, but I have this brain of a teenager. What am I going to do as I grow up? I mean, that's an interesting thing for young people to experience. Yeah, this is me going through my transitional stage. This is me going through puberty. This is me going through, this. I mean, not that Lion-O is ever going to teach you about sex, but you get my point. It's an interesting narrative tool to create. Far different from just turning the Thundercats into a fucking joke. If you want to make fun of how voice acting and all this other stuff was in the 80s, you go right ahead. You can make fun of production all you want, but that's kind of a meta comedy, and that's very different. That's something where you're still appreciating what's before you in a way, or you just hate it, as compared to it being made for its own sake, comedy for its own sake in that sense, and in which case it becomes insulting to what the franchise had done, and insulting to children and adults alike, to all of us. That's why everybody got so enraged about that new Thundercats. But anyway, and the Teen Titans, just quick with that example. Yeah, that's annoying because in the comic books, they're not they're full, they're very much adults. Even if they're teenagers, they're very grown up. Right. And that's stupid too. So, okay, let's go on to our next question here. And this is, okay. Yeah. So this is in reference to, something I briefly mentioned it when we were talking about the Atari VCS, which did, millions of dollars in pre-orders. So now let's see, in television, there is going to be a rebranding of it in television. Now there's a press release. The full details don't come out till October 1st, but they're announcing it. They're going to recreate the Intellivision. It's going to be on this whole classic console craze, which I think is just an absolutely wonderful fucking thing. I think it's great. And so the person asked, do you think this will be another ColecoVision Chameleon? I heard you mention once you were a fan of Intellivision. What was your background with it, if any? Don't care if Prime or not, or name me or not. Hail Thanos. Yeah, hail Thanos. So this comes from Jim Jesus of the Lulberts. I don't mind naming him. Yeah, I did like the Intellivision. It's not a system that I spent a lot of time on, mainly because when the Intellivision has an impressive multi-decade history, and it really did do a lot of firsts for its day. It was, kind of the first 16-bit gaming system. I mean, it had a lot going for it. But for me at that time, the Commodore 64 kind of took over in my mind, and the Nintendo, just that's what you were, playing Nintendo is what you're able to talk to other people about. So, not everybody had an Intellivision. So I have a history with it. I enjoyed it. for what it was, but it wasn't something that I played like nonstop. If this thing actually comes to fruition, and if it's done in the style of the NES Classic or the SNES Classic, or the Mega Drive Mini or whatever, if it's done in the style where really we're just repackaging classic games and putting it in, I think it could exist. I think it could come to fruition, and I would buy it. Okay, I would absolutely buy it. If, however, because, I buy, they have, like, for Nintendo DS, which, of course, I would put into my Nintendo 3DS, they have all these, like, Intellivision Classics cartridges that you can buy where it's like 30 games or something and you can play it on your 3DS. I buy those for almost every system, and I enjoy the hell out of them. But if they're going to try and do like the Atari VCS, and it seems to me that if they don't have the details for this thing until October 1st, 2018, they're trying to gauge interest, which is similar to what the Atari VCS did, because so many people signed up for their newsletter, myself included, or signed up to get updates. And that's pretty much all the Intellivision is asking for at the website, which I'll mention it, intellivisionentertainment.com. If they are trying to do what the Atari VCS is, or if they're trying to do what the ColecoVision Chameleon did, which ended up being complete bullshit, it was a total scam, where they are trying to make a platform that, like an actual console that you could put cartridges into and that you could make new games for. If they're trying to do that, oh yeah, this isn't real. It's not happening. I am, unless one of the really big companies or some really, like a tech giant or something is the one releasing the console that can take new cartridges and play new retro games and all that, or if it's like Hyperkin or something, like, I just don't believe that it's actually going to be a thing. I just don't. Now, if Hyperkin said that they were working with Intellivision, I'd believe it, because like that's a company that has a track record, right? Or if Analog, like Analog.co, if Analog was working with Intellivision, I'd believe it. Okay, but if it's just them, like I think it's going to be, it's going to be another ColecoVision, another Chameleon, and it's just going to be BS. But if it just comes out as a mini with some preloaded games, yeah, I'm on board. I'll take it. I'll buy it. I'm all for that. So, okay. Let's move on to the next. Someone said they were shocked to find out that Star Trek Voyager was my favorite Star Trek. Could I explain why? Okay, so this is in reference, Ellen, Stephanie, and I, the best. Woo! We released just yesterday, actually in place of where this episode was supposed to be, we released the Star Trek update for June 2018, which we did like a whole series overview and character overview and everything of Star Trek Voyager, and we listed off some of our top episodes, and it was so inspiring, like literally that night, all three of us, we were watching, we sat down and we were watching, the Borg episodes. We called it the Borg Collective, of watching all of the Borg episodes. The other night we did it too. We did it again. We just kept going. So, and it's a ton of fun. I mean, they are such great characters, or such a great villain. And, Voyager really got to explore them so much more. It's a real joy to enjoy those episodes, and especially with those two ladies. I mean, they're my two favorite people on planet Earth, but also, I mean, like the commentary that the three of us have when watching this shit is so great. You can't ask for a better life. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think I said this on the Star Trek update. Like my opinion fluctuates, okay, with what is kind of my favorite, like it wasn't until maybe a year ago that I finally said, no, you know what, Picard is better than Kirk, right? I mean, it took me a while to get there, but I'm there now, so and that's important. But yeah, I put Voyager at the top. Like, I said it on the show. I mean, there are what I think very clever storylines that get done. Very, very clever storylines. There are some of these stories, some of the plots. I mean, some of the episodes are real hard science fiction, which is so quote unquote hard to get at any point in time. The Expanse being maybe the exception, and Babylon 5 being an exception, but otherwise we usually don't get hard science fiction, certainly on television or hell, even in movies. And Voyager would deliver on that a lot, because they wouldn't spend so much time even with a morality play. They would just be, no, we're going to do science fiction for science fiction's sake. And that's the other thing I like about it, is that they would, Voyager had so much Star Trek lore to build on top of that they just took everything to the nth degree, right? They took everything to the next level. And they're like, oh, well, the doctor, will come out and say, like in the episode Scorpion, he'll say, well, I was able to modify the Borg nanites and all this stuff. I mean, and, you didn't even know what the hell Borg nanites were. Back in 88 when Q Who aired, right? Or 89 when that aired. So, it got to take everything as an advancement. Everything's all this technology and the amount of jargon, of tech jargon, okay, or what they call technobabble, okay, or Trek babble, either one. I've heard them both used, where it's like just terms that mean something in Star Trek. The raw amount of it in that, if you're a major Star Trek fan, it's so beautiful to hear it. And you really get lost in the Star Trek universe with Star Trek Voyager. I mean, you get lost in a good way. And I love it for that. I think that that's so cool. It is Star Trek for Star Trek's sake. It is very much the culmination of everything that Star Trek is, in relation to Star Trek itself, not in relation to what's happening for you right now. As to where a lot of Star Trek was a commentary on the modern day, Star Trek Voyager is Star Trek in the Star Trek universe being as Star Trek-y as it can be. And I fucking love it for it. Okay. So that's really always been my thing, with Star Trek Voyager. And I love the significantly, really, compared to other shows, the larger female cast was really great. Female villains, even, a lot. I mean, yeah, Lursa and B'Etor, I know. But I really appreciated that. I think Janeway's a tremendous character. I talked about that. I thought she's my favorite. I think she's my favorite character. You get Seven of Nine, you have B'Elanna Torres, you have all these. I mean, like they really, really did a great job of. I mean, they doubled very much. I think the amount of. Well, yeah, D Space Nine at the time, and so not exactly a doubling, but almost a doubling of the amount of women characters in that you could think of in the Star Trek universe. That were major characters, that were primary cast. So and I appreciate that, and they'd all be on the bridge at various points. I mean, it was really, really great, and because that's something I want to see. It's part of the enjoyment for me. Okay, so it matters. So yeah, Star Trek Voyager, awesome. I don't know if I'd ever. It's tough to do a full ranking, of that. I really love Enterprise. There was a time where I thought Enterprise was kind of my favorite show. Like, I love the character of T'Pol. I think she is dynamite. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to love about that show. So, but yeah, right now Voyager really does just kind of sit at the top for me. And the Intrepid class is such a cool ship too. Like, I mean, the actual Voyager itself is such a cool thing. And you got to admit, at least to me, in my opinion, the opening to Voyager is hands down the most beautiful Star Trek opening ever done. I mean, the visuals are stunning. Jerry Goldsmith's theme that he wrote, that Chad Away ended up conducting, is tremendous. I mean, man, and of course, Jerry Goldsmith is God when it comes to music. I mean, just he beats John Williams. He beats them all, and rest in peace, buddy. But anyway, so there you go. I mean, if you're shocked by that, I'm really, and then of course, I mean, in my head, when I was watching Voyager, like, I imagined all the sex that was happening on the show because it had to be happening, because they had to be thinking about being a generational ship and all that. I don't care that they never showed it. It had to be happening. And I would think about that, pretty often. I mean, these are the only humans you've got, or the only people that you're really like, even if it's other alien species, they're the only ones you're familiar with. So you're going to start pairing up, or who knows, in my mind, I'd say that some of them might even gotten into triads and everything. You're already living an unconventional life, being lost in the Delta Quadrant, and for some goddamn reason still following Starfleet protocol. Hey, rock and roll, have those unconventional, relationships or polyamorous stuff or whatever. And all that shit, it runs through my head when I watch it too. So, like in my own mind, and I do this with lots of things, movies and shows, I can make things infinitely more enjoyable and sexier by adding in scenes in my head of what's happening during certain moments, with what's actually being put onto the screen. So yeah, that puts Voyager over the top for me, as far as, being top spot. Okay, so I think that's enough questions there. Didn't really have, we had the Intellivision question. That's kind of a tech question. Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a ton of these minis, get released, but unfortunately, like I said, a lot of these mini consoles, retro consoles, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see much of them after the fact. I think that, the way that games are made now, you're not going to have anything to re-release in the future. So that's a real problem to consider. Like I said, all these game companies, they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're just taking money now, and in a very real sense, they are losing money that they can make in the far future, 30 years later and whatever. But most companies don't think the long term anymore. And that's an interesting thing to explore as well. So, all right, let's get into the album of the week. I'm going to toss a classic on you here because I think that this is absolutely totally underrated but brilliant album. And this album is from, it really shouldn't be, and this is part of the problem. This is why I think it got ignored. This album's from Motley Crue. Okay, stop right there. Because it's not Motley Crue with Vince Neil at the helm. It's Motley Crue with John Corabi after Vince Neil left and went solo. And honestly, I think he did great solo records, or at least certainly his first one, Exposed, was badass. I mean, there's so many great songs on that. Carved in Stone, and you get into the later stuff, that's a little different, but certainly Exposed was fantastic. He's working with Steve Stevens and everything. I mean, it was really great. So, but Motley Crue itself, what's left of it, Tommy Lee, Mick Mars, Nikki Sixx, and then bringing in lead singer John Corabi, who would be known from, Union and other things, was a very different animal. Like, as where Vince Neil sounded kind of like a sequel to Motley Crue no longer sounded like Motley Crue. They were trying to fit in, and this album, which was a self-titled album, Motley Crue, or what is often called Motley Crue 94, because it came out in 94, just so you know what the hell you're talking about. And that's always the challenge with self-titled albums, right? Is that, are you talking about the band or are you talking about the album? So I'll call it Motley Crue 94, or I'll just call it 94. They were really trying to fit in with the grunge scene, and they did this album is really, really raunchy and really heavy and like really gritty. Like the guitars sound wholly different from anything you've ever heard Motley Crue do or since. Even Generation Swine, which would see the return of Vince Neil, which originally was supposed to have Corabi and was supposed to be a sequel to Motley Crue 94. I mean, there's nothing that sounds like this album, and it is a great, heavy, rocking album, and it's almost track for track. I mean, there's so many good songs. It opens right up with Power to the Music, really heavy, and Corabi's voice is not screamo, but he's got a very raspy and an intense voice. And I mean, I don't know, it's kind of a grinding voice. I mean, it's not grinding in like that it's high pitched. It's actually kind of lower pitched. But it has this really unique sound. I mean, I think Corabi's voice sounds fantastic on this album. And with Mick's and Nicky's, guitars in the background and Tommy's, really slammed down the drums hard as usual, bashing the skins. I mean, this is a crazy album. So Power to the Music, that's fantastic. It gets into Hooligan's Holiday, which is kind of the major single from it. And this is a song, Hooligan's Holiday, you listen to it, you just feel like a badass. You feel like going and robbing a bank, frankly. I mean, it is such like it's hard to describe. You got to listen to it. That was the major hit off of there. There was another song they tried to release off of that, which was Misunderstood. Also a great song. But it didn't take off. Their Uncle Jack. I mean, there's a ton of great songs, but don't let the name Motley Crue fool you. This sounds nothing like Motley Crue, but it also doesn't sound bad. Sometimes when, a band tries to branch out and try different things, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is one of those cases where actually if you listen to music critics, and not that you should, but if you listen to music critics, most of them will say the same thing that I said, which is that if they didn't label it Motley Crue, if they didn't call themselves Motley Crue, this could have been one of the biggest albums of the 90s. It's that good. And it really is. I mean, it's just a super intense, evil sounding album. I can't recommend it enough. And certainly, the 4 songs I listed off are fantastic, but I mean, there's just the whole thing is just really, really raunchy and just very, it just has this badass sound. And I don't know many albums that even sound like this, and I don't know how they pulled it off right, because other bands at the time were trying to do this too. Like Def Leppard came out with Slang. Now, I love Def Leppard's Slang. I think it's an awesome album. But where they tried to have a harder, edgier sound and, something that might not even be all about, singing about women and everything like Def Leppard is wont to do, which I love. But, that didn't necessarily hit with people. I liked it, but I admit that it's a little bit of an acquired taste. I don't think that's true with Motley Crue 94. I think they knocked it right out of the park. They knew exactly what they were going for, and they fucking delivered, but nobody would listen to it because it said Motley Crue, and for some goddamn reason, people think Motley Crue are a joke, which they're not. They're wildly talented. So Well, I mean, there was a time where they weren't talented. Yes, I understand that. Okay, like Nikki Sixx will be the first to tell you he didn't really know how to play bass for a while. But obviously that changes as time goes on, and they had still released great music up until their final tour, which Stephanie and I had the pleasure. I mean, genuine pleasure. It was awesome to see that a couple of years ago. But anyway, check out Motley Crue 94. If you never listen to this, and start right up, start from Power to the Music, go into Hooligan's Holiday, and just let that whole thing ride. I mean, it is just a heavy fucking album, and Karabi's voice, you're not going to hear Vince Neil at all. Karabi's voice is a totally different animal, and it fits for the attitude of the guitars, and I think it really fits in for the attitude of the time. I'm not the biggest fan of grunge. I'll be the first to rip on Nirvana, but Motley Crue did it right. Like, I mean, if you wanted some badassery, they delivered on that big time. So check out Motley Crue 94. Anyway, all right. So there should be other content coming out. Well, there's going to be plenty of other content coming out in June. But of course, next week is Porkfest, and I'll be doing the live Sovereign Tech from there. And there might be some surprises as to who shows up on that. And of course, you are getting the best episode this coming Saturday, which the best is literally, in my opinion, the best, and that's me, Ellen, and Stephanie. It's going to be fucking awesome. I can't wait for you to hear that episode, and just tons of other great stuff to come out. I've got some interesting plans for June, and of course you'll get your Sovereign Tech newsletters are coming. That's going to be awesome. Just a great time. So anyway, that's it for this week's Q&A. Wow, we finally did one that's a little under an hour for once. How about that? Efficiency, baby. Human optimization. That's what it's all about. I will see all of you on the other side.